Welcome to Ovary-Acting, your ecosystem for all things women, where we take your health and wellness seriously, but ourselves, not so much. I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Ashby, clinician, acupuncturist, researcher, and your guide through this female journey. Why are we doing this podcast? Because you deserve a life revolution, one where you feel informed and empowered, but also where we can discuss and laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. This is a place where we call out the elephant in the room. So if you want some smart talk with a wink, stick around because we're about ready to shake things up. I am very excited because today I have Grace Kraaijvanger, the founder of the Hivery, a San Francisco Bay Area-based women's co-working space, inspiration lab, and mentorship community for women creating their next chapters, whether growing a business, writing a book, or getting paid for their art and expertise. Grace is a trailblazer in community-centered programming and generously designed community spaces, or gorgeously, oh my gosh, I can't even read, gorgeously designed community spaces. Grace has hosted luminaries including Jill Biden, Diane von Furstenberg, Shannon Watts, Marie Forleo, and Chip Conley, and has been featured in Forbes, Elle, Architectural Digest, and Entrepreneur Magazine. She has built a network connecting thousands of women entrepreneurs, creatives, and leaders, and is a recognized expert in community-based businesses, purpose-driven work for women, for and with women, and a respected mentor on how to create our lives like artists. That is such a beautiful introduction, Grace, and I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to Ovary-Acting.
Oh, Jennifer, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm excited because Grace and I actually met at a friend's 60th birthday party, and I immediately started chatting with her in the kitchen and fell in love with her. So I was like, oh, can I please interview you for the podcast? And she is here now, and she has quite a colorful, juicy background. She is an artist herself, and I want to start when I read a lot about you and after talking to you a little bit about your history, I want to dive right in with some questions for you. And you have described this rustling, right? This unrest that started when you were 27, quite young. And it was a feeling you said you couldn't quite name. And I feel like so many women going through hormonal shifts, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal, describe that exact same sensation. Like, I know for me, it started for me in my 40s. I felt like I was aching to become somebody that I'd never met. I didn't know how to find her or how to get there. And I actually, my marriage disintegrated because I was so desperate to find myself, but I didn't even know what that was. It wasn't like I wasn't being myself. So my question to you is, do you think that yearning was ahead of its time, being that you were 27? Or do you think it was like always pointing you toward creating spaces? And the Hivery, the side note, the Hivery is not just women, or it is just women. So the question is, do you think that yearning was ahead of its time? And do you think it pointed you toward the Hivery? And is the Hivery a co-ed space or a mostly women-led space?
Yeah, well, I'll take that question first. So the Hivery's mission is to elevate the voices of women. And I know we're going to talk more in this conversation about where that mission came from. But fundamentally, it's a belief that kept knocking on my door again and again, that every woman has a unique potential inside of her to share that DNA piece of her that's like her wisdom, her experience, her pain, her grief, the past jobs she's had, the ones that she hated, the ones that she loved, the ones that taught her, the ones that experiences that shaped her. I believe so fundamentally that we each have a unique contribution to this world. And I believe that there need to be spaces, literal and metaphorical spaces, for women to create that meaningful work. And I'll come back to that yearning and wrestling that I experienced that ultimately led me to this place. But the Hivery is based on this belief that women have unique potential inside each of us that can be expressed and celebrated. I believe it takes a whole society to do that. Everyone is welcome at the Hivery, but the Hivery's fundamental mission is to elevate the voices of women and help us to each uncover that unique, powerful, meaningful sense of purpose and meaningful work inside us. So I have a huge, 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 fierce advocacy for women, um, and I dedicate this space to that. And anyone is welcome who can contribute and believes in that momentum and kind of the commitment and conviction around what women can create. So I'll leave that there, and then I'll come back to your question around the, like, at 27, this like wrestling or yearning. I think some of it came from the very lucky position that I was in, that I started my I started dancing when I was 4 years old, and I became a professional dancer, and I'm so proud of even just that sentence, that because it's, that was a hard-earned road, but what happened in the path of being a dancer from age 4 onward, uh, is that I tasted what it was like to be relentlessly committed to my work. And I tasted what it was like to be passionate about my work. And I tasted what it was like to be in creative community, and in creative alignment with my work. Even though it was so challenging, even though the road of becoming a professional dancer is the hardest thing, one of the hardest things I've ever done. Um, so I think tasting that and experiencing that then led to that wrestling and yearning, because at 27, I was starting to think about after my dance career.
A second career already at 27.
Yes, and the second act of what that would look like. And I think, again, it was a gift that I had experienced what it was like to be passionate about my work. But you also, once you've tasted that, you're not going back. You're not going to, you don't go back to like, oh, it's fine, I'll settle, I'll just do. So I didn't want to not feel that again. I wanted to, whatever that next chapter meant for me, I wanted that feeling again that I had as a dancer.
Achieving and that
Well,
excellence?
actually more, no, it it was more the purpose driven and the passion and the creativity. I wanted that. That was like nectar to me.
Yeah.
So some of the wrestling and the yearning and the thing I couldn't put my finger on, that later I've now experienced what you're describing, which is that so many of us feel this way of, like, I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that there was something more for me in this next chapter of my life that would have that quality of commitment and of passion and of purpose and of meaning and conviction. And I didn't know what that was. Um,
Mhm.
but so the yearning was like, I need that. And that started very early for me, I think, because the reality is that I was leaving a career, as a dancer, and I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know if that would look like a different variation of being a dancer. I thought at that age, at 27, 28, I was living in San Francisco at the time. I was pregnant with my daughter. Um, and I wondered, which is an obvious reason why a dancer is starting to think about, like, what's next. I was pregnant. Like, who hires a 9-month pregnant dancer? You know, typically it's not your most coveted time as a dancer when you're pregnant. But I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was really considering opening a dance studio in San Francisco, or kind of the what next. And
Mhm.
that question, what next, and that wrestling and that yearning has ended up being like kind of the through line for then what I later created in the Hivery, is just this feeling that so many of us are going, now what? What's next for me? And what is that deeper sense that I want? For
Mhm.
me, it was like a feeling. I wanted a feeling of being passionate. I wanted a feeling
Mhm.
of being in creative community.
So, a couple more questions.
Yeah, of
Since
course.
you got your wrestling so early, because there's very few careers that end in your late 20s, um, do you feel like you went through it again with menopause? Do you feel like that the craving and the identity, that you have with wanting to advocate whatever your nectar was? Do you feel like you've hit it again at different points in your life as a female? Well, we'll start with that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, that's and when you were introducing me in the beginning and you talked about, like, living life as an artist, I think and even building business for me as an artist, I think that's the piece like, I think about, Martha Graham. There's a Martha Graham quote where she says, "No artist is ever satisfied." And in some ways, I feel like that's what you're talking about because yes, I felt that feeling when I was 27, but I also felt it in my 30s in times of deep grief. I also felt it in my 40s in, other periods of turbulence and life turning upside down. I also feel it, I'm 51. I certainly feel it now in this stage of life. It feels like another chapter of reinvention, re-inspecting, re like almost like re-meeting myself again. I'm an empty nester now. In the last, I'm a 3-year experienced empty nester, so I've had some, like all of those changes and life things that come up. But what I think is really fascinating, what I've learned through the Hivery and meeting with so many women, is that I think that there is like almost a notion that we're going to figure this thing out, that we're going to figure out who we are and we're going to figure out what we want to do. And that once we figure that out, that we'll have this like static outcome of like, this is who I am. This is what I do. That has not been my experience at all, like in the slightest. And what I'm actually really excited about within the Hivery that I'm personally experiencing over and over and over again is that true artists are seekers. Like we're
Mm,
seekers we're curious and we want to create things and inspect and then recreate and
uh,
change mediums and maybe even throw parts of our art away or start over or we're writers that become that get into ceramics or we're dancers that turn into writers or like I think that's actually a really for lack of a better word, cool thing. I think it's
yeah.
really interesting and really cool to be a seeker. So I'm interested in this way that we continuously over time, we're continuing to evolve. So I had these questions at 27, but I've been a seeker ever since.
Yeah.
So I
Couple
think
of
I'm kind of
things.
relearning.
Will you tell people who Martha Graham is for those of our listeners who don't know?
Yes, Martha Graham is an absolutely amazing dance pioneer. She's considered, to many like the pioneer of modern dance in the United States. She danced until, and anyone that wants to read up on an amazing woman, read about Martha Graham. I think she did her final like curtain call at maybe 90. I mean, she just was so committed to creating a body of work. And what I love, I've read a number of her biographies. There's a biography by Agnes de Mille that I'm blanking on the name, but if you look up Martha Graham's biography by Agnes de Mille, it just talks about the iterative process of her exploring who she was, not who she was as a dancer or choreographer, but who she was fundamentally even as a woman. And it's some of those questions that she asks and that idea of kind of like this like never ending uncovering of who we are that I think is so it's so relevant to how I felt in all these stages of womanhood.
Yeah, so that's I was just gonna say, like, you describe artistry and the reinvention of self through creativity, that nectar of art. And it made me think immediately that that's like being a woman, right? We go through these different phases, starting endocrinologically, and whether we choose to have children or not, there are these layers of almost different personalities. There are different components of our personality, and they begin and they end, and another one begins and it ends. And the span of our life is this constant reinvention of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I never thought it almost makes me teary. Woo, didn't expect that. I've never thought of it in terms of our own internal art, like the art of
Yeah.
ourselves.
That's I just get so excited about that metaphor
Yeah.
because it gives us permission to continue working on it. It
Yeah.
gives us permission like, I
Oh,
think
so
that there's
true.
such a misconception and I wonder if you could relate to this. There's such a misconception that everyone else has it figured out and that we're the only one like standing in the art studio of life going like, what the hell is this project anyway? Like, what am I making? What is this all about? And
Yeah.
I think when we approach it like art, then we realize like it's okay to not know. It's okay to go into the studio every day with a lot of questions about what you're trying to be in this world.
Oh
I
my god, you
love
just came up with the title of this episode. That is such a beautiful analogy, Grace. Like I always feel like what is the one thing I've pulled from an interview, and you just totally inspired me. That was my
I'm so
pull.
glad.
Thank you. Yeah, and then, right, we get to this point where if we chose to have children, they're grown, they're leaving, maybe we've been in a career for a long time like I have, and we're like, so, what's the next act? I'm 59. I just wrote my first book. That's crazy. Oh, I'm gonna do a shameless promotion.
Yeah, let's see it. I'm
Aha!
all
So
about women
here she
promoting. Oh,
is,
I
the
love it.
energy prescription, ancient wisdom and modern science for thriving through menopause. Wiley Publishing comes out October 20th. Pre-order now. I mean, we've got the Amazons and the Barnes& and Nobles. We have a Barnes& and Noble, discount coming out, I think tomorrow. We'll post that on social media, but you can also order it through your privately owned bookstores. Pre-orders are on now. And that's my new baby. Okay, that was the shameless plug. But yes, so we go through where now we are in this like really what's happening, right? Like it's almost like the wheels have slowed a little bit and we have time to reflect and recreate. Many of us, not all of us, but many of us do. You did bring up a phase of life. You said career changing in my 20s, becoming a mother, and then you said grief in my 30s, I believe. I know or I've read about you that your mother's death was clearly a turning point, if it's okay with you, if we kinda dive into that. And you've described it as both loss and a wake-up call about unlived dreams. How did grief become a creative force for you rather than just something to survive?
Yeah, I mean, I think creativity was like a place to put this like profoundly invasive energy that is grief. There's I think when we lose someone that is, a deep and meaningful and a beloved part of our lives, um, I needed I didn't know what to do with all of that emotion. I didn't know what to
Mm,
do. Like it like overtook my body and like you're I remember in this it's been quite some time now, but I just remember this feeling of like I couldn't walk it off, I couldn't talk it off, I didn't know what to do with all that energy of grief, and so for me, again, it felt, um, it felt like an invasion in a way of, like, these, like, relentless questions of, like, "Well, now what are you going who are you? What are you going to do with this life?" I definitely saw my mom died young, she died at 62, um, and I definitely felt this feeling. For me, it was probably the most profound first experience of this. And sadly, I've had many other experiences of this, but it was the first experience of really seeing someone who was not done,
mm,
really experiencing someone who was not like did not feel complete.
mm.
And even though we could have beautiful conversations in her process of dying about she was starting to be accepting of the situation, but she was not done. And as her daughter, afterward, that sat with me and made and woke me up to the places that I didn't feel done. And again, back to your previous questions, the places that I felt wrestling, the places that I felt yearning, the things that I wanted out of this precious life. And part of what was really important to me and is not important is not I mean, we're all so unique, but what was really important to me was to make a meaningful contribution. I wanted to do something that mattered in this
Mm,
lifetime, and I
mhm,
didn't know what that was. Dance mattered to me, but it that I didn't feel like that wasn't the thing for me at that moment that I was having this experience of grief for my mom. It was there was something unidentified, and that's when that kind of the language around wrestling and yearning and like this thing that would not leave me alone of what are you meant to contribute? And what kept coming up for me was around women.
Mhm. I love that. Well, and a great segue to the next question. Thank you.
Sure.
So you have now walked alongside more than 8,000 women in their personal and professional reinventions. Is there a pattern you keep seeing in the women who find their way to the Hivery? A particular moment or like a breaking point that brings them through the door to you, to the Hivery itself?
Yeah, I love that question because I definitely see patterns.
Mhm.
One pattern that I see that is like it's kind of a sad truth, honestly, but a sad truth is that fundamentally, and this is what happened to me, and it's what I see now as a pattern in many other women. Fundamentally, what causes us to really inspect and change our lives is often an earthquake of our lives, right? Like we don't really seek out change when everything is going well. That's, if things are going pretty smoothly, like why would we shake them up?
The nature of being human, absolutely.
Right. So us like humble humans, what we tend to do is when things are going along status quo, we're not, that's not really the period of time that we're often really inspecting. It's when something happens, like a life-quake happens. When something happens, so what often brings people to the Hivery is something that they weren't expecting that's forcing them to really look at the life they want to create next. And that can look like an external factor. It can look like
Mhm,
getting laid off from a job. It can look
mhm.
like ageism in getting rehired. It can look like taking time off, taking time away from a career to as a caregiver, whether that's to raise children or care for family. And then maybe it's trying to re-enter and struggling in that process. Maybe it's a career that you're miserable in and you want out of, and you can't find your way through that.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a death in the family, like what happened to me, that is asking profound questions of you. But there's often a catalyst that I would say is not easy. There's or a divorce or a separation or, a major loss of identity or a financial loss. There's often something that happens that's not
right.
easy. And it makes us go, wait a second, like, who am I on the other side of this? That's a
So
pattern.
yeah, because a lot of the women on overreacting are perimenopausal or postmenopausal, and they're navigating like these massive identity shifts. So, do you
Yeah.
see that kind of stage of life predominant in the population at the Hivery?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there are a number of um, midlife women that are, I joke like one of the ways that I know we have a lot of midlife women is the temperature control in a space like the Hivery is like a circus act. I mean, someone's always freezing, someone's always sweating, someone's so yes, like, we're going through all these things together. Like, so it is funny. But the Hivery is for all stages of creating meaningful work for a woman. So we have some women that aren't anywhere near perimenopause, and we have some women that are, we have there was a woman at one of our events recently. It was so fun to talk to her. She was in her early 80s. She was an ex ballerina at San Francisco Ballet. We had the most fun conversation, but
I
we
bet.
draw across all ages. But fundamentally, there's so many of us that are going through so many different life stages like perimenopause and menopause that of course that's inherent in the community and conversation.
I love it. Do you have you so identify with being an artist? I do not. As a person, I'm much more of a clinician academic. I always say I'm the art appreciator, but not the artiste. Um, and I think that there's probably gonna be at least half of the people that listen to Ovary-Acting that don't identify as artists. Um, and you've talked a little bit about finding your inner artist. I've read things that you've written about finding your
Yeah.
inner. How do you help someone who spent decades in as a caregiver or professional, or maybe even people that identify as being kind of people pleasers, like reconnect with something that can feel authentically theirs? Just like, do you have Like, what's your inspirational injection for people?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I think is really important is and I don't think society has really taught us how to do this. I think that there has been a societal message that we're supposed to have things figured out and that
Mm,
we're just supposed to know what each chapter of life what our contribution and identity of each chapter of life is. We're just supposed to know what that is. But fundamentally, what I've learned is that because we may think that we're just supposed to know, and yet there's this like yearning and wrestling and feeling of like the unknown and craving clarity and wanting to know what the next chapter looks like when things feel uncertain. Um, so I have found, and I'm so guilty of this, that we only allow space to figure it out in the shower. Like we're like washing our hair, going
girl, it's my
I
most
gotta figure out my life. You know what I mean? Or we're like on a hike and we're like, I'm gonna go on this I gotta figure like what am I doing? Who am I? But
car hikes and showers, they're like
right?
my
It's
epiphany places, yeah.
totally and that's valid. And there's I'm sure that there's like even scientific reasons why our mind allows, allows for expansiveness in that time. But like our 4-minute shampoo is not, that's really, it's not fair to us to expect that we uncover and clarify and even activate any sort of next chapter from the shower. Like we need space for that. We need time for that. We need community for that. And I'm really interested in this idea, like number one, of like allowing it to be true that even if you don't feel like an artist, so let's say you don't feel creative in the least, treating your life like a work of art allows you to work on it.
I want you to
Like
write a book on that. I just
I
love it so
I
much.
am.
Oh, good.
I am writing a book on it.
Yeah.
Yes, I am, and it's taken me forever. I've been working on this book for almost a decade, but it's fine. Um, I feel like it's so uh, I don't think we've been taught how normal and okay it is to not know,
Yeah.
and how normal and okay it is to experiment, and how normal and okay it is like to learn what you want to do next by taking like micro activations of what you want to do next. And it
Mhm.
doesn't like we don't need to go um back to school to like it's not like in order to figure out what I want to do next, I would have to go back to school. I'd have to become a PhD. I'd have to devote like, a decade to like I can take a micro action that informs me and then the next micro action and then the next micro action. And what that does is it frees me from this commitment that I may not be ready for. I want to explore like an artist. I want to go in the studio, mess around with the clay of my life and see what comes out of that. Right? Like I get so excited about the idea of it being an act of creativity
Yeah,
versus a
like
commitment.
allowing the space for exploration. That is amazing. In East Asian medicine, like, we talk a lot about particularly menopause, like it's actually the end of the reproductive years, which sounds really sexist, but it's kind of the way that they look, like pre-reproduction, reproduction, and post-reproduction. But
Okay.
they look at it often as the most powerful chapter in a woman's life, because we shift, we adjust to the way we look at how we spend our energy, and we turn a little bit more inward onto like our own purpose. We have so much
Yes.
wisdom to offer. It's the grandmother hypothesis. It's, that I think we're one of 4 large brain species that keep women around decades beyond our reproductive years, because we have so much to offer that evolution made space for us, right? Like the resources it takes to keep us alive are less than what we have to offer with wisdom. And 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 I'm wondering, it feels like the Hivery is like a nest for that, right? Like, um, does that resonate for you with what you
Oh my
witnessed
gosh,
at the
like you
Hivery?
just blew my mind. I was like, "Oh my goodness," because I mean, even fundamentally, like I'll just give my own personal experience. Like I have been a really busy, active, like I try to do way too much, as I know so many women that are listening. I raised my kids while starting the Hivery, while like expanding into other locations, while trying to figure out how to like fund a business that I never done that before. And I mean, I was trying to do a million things, a million miles an hour all at once. Like 80% of the time feeling overwhelmed and fried. And what's really interesting right now, I'm not going to say that I don't feel overwhelmed and sometimes fried, but I have a lot more space in my life to tend to my own creation, to tend to the things that are important to me, to like turn my time and attention. And I'll just give you like the silliest example, but this has been real for me. So I have two kids, 21 and 23, and they're like, almost or basically adults, which is so they're I'm so lucky that I still get to see them a lot. I get a lot of time with them, but they're not counting on me. They have their own lives. They live in other places. My son's living with us this summer while he's doing an internship. But the point is that I'm not actively caring for their day-to-day schedules. And I remember there was a point last year where I realized I'm like, because I don't have to make anyone dinner, I can work as long as my energy wants me to. Like I will work as long as I'm in flow. And it was kind of stunning to me where I'm like, oh my God, this is a time in my life where I can just stay. If I'm in flow and want to work until 7 and eat whatever's in the fridge for dinner, it's up to me. And
Freedom.
it was such freedom. It's such a ridiculous example, but dinner like rocked my world where I'm like, I don't have to do anything for dinner. Like I don't even have to eat dinner if I don't
That's
want to.
right.
Like I can eat broccoli for dinner. I could do whatever I want. And that small, silly little example was like, wait a second. My life, like I have so much more expanse of time.
I love it. When we were just on vacation and one of my very adult children was like, I'm hungry. We were walking through town. I'm hungry. And I just was like, that is not my job anymore. I don't
Right.
even want that job. You are a adult by many years. Say, I'm going to go feed myself and walk away. And they said, you're my mom. And I'm like, oh, not like that anymore. I'm not.
Right.
Go feed yourself. You got this. You do it
What
every day without me.
And I think we become so used to the ritual and pattern of other people depending on us and and us supporting other people's like livelihood, happiness, satisfaction, problem solving, all those things, that all of a sudden there is a point in midlife where you're like, whoa, wait a second. Like, you mean I'm gonna have some more, not just time, but like headspace? Like, whoa.
You know how I keep my adult children from just coming over? I've told them all that who knew naked cooking could be so much fun, and now they call first.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
You describe, and men and women describe often to me, like, the invisibility that they often feel in their lives, and it can be at any age, but in the workplace and culture, sometimes even in their own families. From what you've described for me at the Hivery, and part of your purpose is the antithesis of that. How do you feel that the Hivery pushes back against this feeling of invisibility?
I think visibility is unbelievably important. And from the smallest act of like when someone walks in the Hivery, they will be greeted and looked in the eye with eye contact out of like respect for the value of that individual woman each
Mm.
and every time she walks through the door. So fundamentally, I feel like to be seen is such a um it's all of us human beings deserve to be seen. We
Yeah.
deserve to be seen. Um, I do think that being seen and taking up space in community takes practice. But I often joke too, like confidence is not required. If you were to wait until you were really confident before you started using your voice and putting your work out in the world, you'd never do it, right? Like there would always be a part of our voice. We wouldn't be on this call right now. I'd be like, oh, I'm not ready for this. I can't do this.
In full
If I
disclosure, Grace, I just finished 5 sessions of hypnotherapy because of how much I feel like, an imposter showing up with a
Yeah.
book, a podcast, online courses, like, all I've known is clinical work, so getting creative and trying to offer things in a more public and creative way, like, destroyed me for a minute. I had to go into hypnotherapy for it.
It's a thing. This is a thing, and I experience it too. Like, you were talking about kind of like identity and that some people might not identify as creative. I didn't identify as a CEO. Like when
Mm.
someone first called me the CEO of the Hivery, I was like looking around like,
Who?
Where's the CEO? I don't see a CEO in here." Um, if I were to wait until I was confident enough to call myself a CEO, I would never be a CEO. So part of it was just embodying and owning that, like, yes, this is an uncomfortable title for me. I'm not experienced in this level of visibility and this level of putting myself out there, and I'm going to do it anyway. And the only way that works for me is to not do it alone. So what
Yes.
community does
Yes.
is kind community, supportive community gathers around to allow you the space and container to experiment and even verbally try on the idea of saying, I'm writing a book. I'm starting a business. I'm going back to work. I'm sharing my wisdom. I'm going to be more visible. Like just the nature of being able to share that with a community that receives you and sees you. And there's huge progress before you even did anything.
Yeah.
Just stepping into that.
I've gotten criticism for getting bigger, publicly, even within my own I mean, not immediate family, not local, and
Yeah.
it's very painful to hear. It kind of is a good segue into, something I wanna ask you because there's a lot of research, now on loneliness as a health crisis, especially for women, especially midlife, whose social structures have often been built around children or partners or jobs. Um, Talk to me about how you think of community. I think of community as underrated medicine, right? Even for introverts, the community can mean different things, but doing things in community, I think, is on so many levels part of what makes us human. That our tribal
Yeah.
natures are overwhelmingly dominant in our DNA. So do you think community is underrated as medicine? I look at Hivery as a solution to that. Was it part of your creative equation when you were thinking about creating a community like this?
Don't think I could have ever known. I mean, I started the Hivery in 2014, so way before the pandemic, way before we started talking, way before we experienced firsthand what it like, the world's kind of biggest experiment on what would happen to us if we isolated. Like,
Mm,
and so I
mm.
think that the pandemic started the brought that conversation to the forefront. I know there have been plenty of scientists and researchers way before then, um, but it got us talking about what happens when we stay alone. Um, and what's interesting is that before the pandemic, I didn't have the scientific background to justify this, but I just kept feeling like I'm like, I promise you, your world will be better. Your level of satisfaction, your level of creativity, your level of productivity, your level of focus, your level of expansive thinking will improve in community. Like I just kept watching it. I didn't need, any research other than what I was seeing right before my very eyes
Right,
and
right.
experiencing as an individual. So I kept seeing this again and again, and people would say things. I mean, they would say the same things over and over. They'd be like, I got it. I'm in my house. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out my next chapter, but I just get so distracted by the laundry. And I'm like, it's not just the laundry. It's not just the chores or the dog barking or it's the lonely. It's that we're trying to figure out these things alone with no one to, again, like experiment with verbally, no one to bounce ideas, no one to feel their energy. And I think for me, the reason that I had experienced this and felt so strongly about it is I knew how I felt in the dance studio.
Mm.
So in the dance studio, when you're around other dancers, when you're around musicians, when you're around costume designers, when you're around choreographers, that creative energy is contagious and you inherently feel more creative. Just plain and simple. You feel more creative in this in community of other creatives. So my hypothesis was that women would be the same. Humans would be the same. Like put us in a space around other people emitting energy and there will be contagious energy. And even if that energy is simply around asking the question, what's next for me? There will be contagious energy.
I think, I love that, and it's true, like, picking up on that when we're isolated, I was reading I don't remember what periodical it was in this morning, but they're really starting to study the mental health crisis that comes with working from home. And I know that during the pandemic, it forced the Hivery to lose its physical home and reinvent entirely. And then from the outside, that looked like a catastrophic loss for you. But you reframed it as proof that the movement was bigger than the walls, that the need for community, tribe, reflection, places to bounce off, a space to for the what did you call it? The clay of your life, that was bigger
Yeah.
than just its home. That is so beautiful. So my question to you is this: for women listening right now who feel that wrestling that you described, that unrest, that something that she can't quite name, what is the first thing that you would tell her to do?
I would say honor it. Like, honor it. Take it seriously. This is our precious life. And I think when we that thing that we keep squashing down, that voice that tells us that there's more for us, that we keep saying like, well, I don't know what it is, or it's too late for me, or I'm too old, or there's too many responsibilities, like that all the things that we push down, um, this is like a funny way to put it, but the words that come up for me are it's like pay now or pay later. Like that is it's not going away. It's not going away. And so honoring that there is something inside each of us that is it's not, I don't want to call it a calling or a purpose because I don't think it's one dimensional like that. I don't think it's a single thing. I think it's something that needs to be tended to that makes us feel, and it can change and it can evolve and it probably will. In my case, it has. Um, it's something that makes us feel alive and makes us feel like all these things we bring together, like all the skills and the past jobs and the experience and the wisdom and the loss and the grief and the unexpected and all these things that we amass in life come forward to make us this unique being with unique potential. And I just believe that that has to be honored. It's like, honor it. And if that means for you writing about it, if that means talking about it, if that means just simply exploring it, um, all of that is honoring it. I think what we can't do is ignore it.
Yeah. It's self-care. I always say that self-care is actually not self-centered behavior,
Yeah.
because when we take care of ourselves, we immediately are better at everything. Right? For ourselves and beyond ourselves, whether it be friendship, family, partnership, community, society, and ultimately stewards of the planet at large. Like, there is nothing that we lose by honoring that
Yeah.
internal voice. I get that. I get that. Thank you. So I want to ask about the Hivery. Like, what does membership at the Hivery look like for someone who wants in? What if people want to create communities similar that are not here where we are in the Bay Area? Who's the ideal member? Just tell us a little bit more about the Hivery
Yeah.
itself.
So the Hivery has a couple different forms. You referenced our spaces. So we have, I sometimes call it a co-working space in air quotes, because it's a co-working. Co-working is transportation for something deeper. It's not your average co-working space. It's more like an inspiration lab. And it is an in-person space and in the Bay Area in Mill Valley, California, where people can come and work and meet and connect. And we do tons of events. So there's this in-person element, an in-person membership for those that are local. We also have, and we'll be reintroducing this in the next couple of months. We have a digital membership that was born out of the pandemic. It was born out of a way to keep us connected when we couldn't be in our in-person spaces. And because of that, we have the gift of members that are all over the world that are still in connection. And we're like reigniting that later this summer. And I'm really excited about it. So if you are not in the Bay Area and want to be involved in the Hivery, get on our email list, go to thehivery.com. And
Hivery. We'll have the link for you.
thank you. Thank you. Go to thehivery.com, get on our email list, and you'll hear more about digital memberships that are coming up. Those digital memberships will have local chapter offerings available within them so that as our digital community grows, that you'll have space for in-person meetups in various locations. I'm so excited about that because what I've realized is that our space is beautiful and inspiring, and it's a gathering point. But women want, need, and create that everywhere. We inherently create these beautiful spaces of community. I'm looking out right now, just as I said that, I'm in the Hivery space and I'm looking out the window of this amazing soundproof phone booth that I'm in, and I just saw two Hivery members hugging as they're meeting, and they just gave each other a hug and then went back to work. That is the kind of we can't get that from our home office. We can't get that alone. So spaces like the Hivery, getting involved in communities like this that care about elevating you, elevating your voice, bringing your next chapter to the forefront of clarity, um, and something that's aligned with your values. We need that. We
Yeah, we
crave
do.
that.
It's in our DNA, actually. It that oxytocin that creates is essential for us to thrive. Okay, so what question do you wish I'd asked you today that I did not ask you, if any?
Um, okay. I don't know if this is a question, but people will sometimes say to me, I wish I was ready for something like the Hivery. I wish I was ready to make change. I wish like there's this there's this I think myth of readiness that I would love to dispel. Or like maybe your question could have been like, how do I know if I'm ready uh, to step into something else in my life or create a next chapter? The same way that I feel like confidence is not required, I also readiness is not a reality. Like we don't really I think waiting for being ready, um, is a bit of a myth. It's
Yeah.
a there's so doing like acting, taking even small actions. Small actions are big. Small
Oh,
actions are, like tiny micro actions. Like you just wrote this book. The only way you wrote the book is to sit down and start writing. That's
that's
the
true.
only way it worked. There was a moment where you sat down for the first 15 minutes and started writing this book. And these micro actions can happen way before we think we're ready.
I say to people all the time, "What can you do today?" And it might be
Right.
different than what you can do tomorrow. I say I teach medical literacy and lifestyle competency. So if adding an extra glass of water is what you can do today, that's a win.
I sometimes ask myself, like, what's the smallest action I can take right now to further who I want to be?
There's
What's the
actually
smallest thing?
there's research on what it does to our brain when we actually step into something that we want, but we don't wanna do or we're afraid to do, and the benefit the long-term benefits to our brain by doing those things, repeatedly both add to long-term, physical and mental health outcomes.
Yes.
And they don't have to be these are not we're not talking about monumental stuff or, like, getting into the Olympics. It's like, write for 15 minutes, add a glass of water, like, it matters.
I just did
Um,
this like tiny little thing at the Hivery. I replaced our little glasses with big glasses. And
good.
this is the tiniest, like, I am drinking so much more water because I have a bigger cup. So, like, it's like the smallest little action
Yep,
can
I'm with you
create,
there.
right?
Okay, so one personal question for you. I love talking to you. I love the way you speak. I love the way you think. I love the way you inspire people to take action.
Thank you.
It's so great to listen to you, Grace. I'm so glad I asked for you to be on here. I wanna
Yay.
ask you one last question. What is the thing you almost didn't do, and what would have been lost if you hadn't done it?
I almost didn't reopen the Hivery after we closed our spaces due to the pandemic. We just ran out of financial runway, like our spaces we had 2 spaces. We had one in San Francisco and one in Mill Valley. The overhead on those spaces was enormous, and we were not able to cover our costs with, like, digital offerings and things like that. So I had to close the spaces, which was a really, as you mentioned, like, heartbreaking and painful thing that happened in 2021. And so from 2021 to 2025, I told myself I will never have an in-person space ever again. I will never, or excuse, I should say 2024. I will never sign another commercial lease. I really was like, never, ever, ever, never. Because, and it was trauma. I was heartbroken and grieving and in pain from what I'd experienced. I felt like it had failed, and I've had so many people reassure me that it's not a failure, but that's how it felt. Um, and I said I would never do it again. And then late 2024, I just could not shake this feeling that I was not done with this work and I was not done with creating in-person experiences. So I started looking to open another in-person space, which I did in early 2025. And I am so stinking glad that I did it.
Right
And it
on.
was hard, and I have never worked as hard as I've worked the last 18 months. And I joke, when I first opened the space, I was in charge of everything from changing the toilet paper roll to the strategic marketing vision of the business. Everything in between.
The startup owner.
Yes, and I'm so glad I did it.
I'm so glad you did it too. I also want to add that the Hivery has events outside the Hivery that are so much fun. I've been to one, and I had went alone, which is my favorite way to attend new things, and I had a blast at
That's
your
amazing.
event. Yeah. How often do you all do events? Like,
Oh my gosh, we do like 20 events a month,
wow.
but some are bigger than others. Like we have recurring classes and weekly member-led meetups at the Hivery. So that's a smaller version of an event, maybe 20 to 30 people sometimes. Um, we've done events with 300. I think most recently we did a dance party for women that was 300 people. We did an event that I think you're alluding to, the Room at the Table event, where we brought all these women's communities together to celebrate Women's History Month and International Women's Day. We did an event last week that was so much fun. It was just a celebration of creativity. I had a blast designing it. It was postcards from the French Riviera. We made it like a staycation event where we watercolored postcards of gorgeous floral blooms, and we made spritzes. It was just fun. Like, sometimes we just need to have joy and fun and play. So we do all kinds of different events, and you can check out what we're doing at thehivery.com/events. And I love our events are open to everyone. You don't have to be a member to come. They're often free or discounted to Hivery members, but everyone is welcome, and they are an absolute joy.
That's another thing. I love that you guys are so inclusive, and it's not just inclusivity based on like growing membership. Like, you're genuinely inclusive, and I think that that changes the vibe of your events. I went in there not knowing if I'd know anybody. I knew somebody at the door immediately. I knew 2 or 3 other people on the inside. I probably met 8 or 9 people that night, but it's not cliquey, and I love that about that space, is that it's really
That's been
welcoming.
very intentional. You'll never hear me refer to the Hivery as a club. You'll never hear me talk about like getting, recommended or like wait lists or like things that make us feel scarce and small and not included. Like, I'm not into that. I don't want that. I feel like women that are craving inclusive, kind environments where they can truly be themselves. I think that's where, kind of getting back to our early conversation, like that's how we get to that yearning, that nectar, that like true sense of self. When we don't have to posture, we're not trying to be anything for anyone. We're not feeling left out, or we have to dress a certain way or act a certain way or come in with knowing people, or like I don't want that. The world is filled with that.
This filled with that. I love it. Thanks for being a pioneer, an inspiration, a revolutionary. Thank you for coming on to Ovary-Acting. Grace Kraaijvanger, it has been nothing but a pure pleasure to listen to you and to have the honor of asking you questions about your creative process. And I'm going to try to come up with something else so I can interview you again in the future.
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. What an honor it is to talk to you.
You're so welcome. Thank you again, all, for joining us on Ovary-Acting, your Ovary-Acting, if I could say it myself, your ecosystem for all things women, where we take your health and wellness seriously, but ourselves not so much. Until next time, thank you.